right,
So
welcome
we're really starting.
Yes, welcome everybody. And my name is Otka, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to the session today on behalf of the Including You team. The event is also the closing finale of the current edition of the Women for Women program, organized by Expert Spouses Initiative and the Living In program from the city of Eindhoven. So today I'm looking forward to discussing with my guest on the topic of building an international workplace and culture and blind spots and opportunities. So we will start the presentation and it will take 20 minutes, and we will have Q&A session for 10 minutes. So when it's 20 minutes over, I will let you know, Deniz. So we'll start the Q&A session. So Deniz is an international herself, and she moved to Netherlands as a talent and has experience right from the start working as a technical recruiter and a HR person. And she became HR business partner to companies in HR, and she uses her expertise in managing international talents. So Deniz has pretty much seen the whole value chain, both as an international talent and also as in local from an employee perspective. So welcome, Deniz, and I'll give you the floor.
Now, good morning, everyone. I will be telling you within the next 20 minutes about my 2 cents regarding what we can do to build a nice international workplace and to bring diversity and inclusion to the agenda so that it will be there as a sustainable way for long periods of time and permanently. Otka just introduced me, and I just wanted to tell one thing because I think that's kind of relevant to this discussion as well. Otka told me that I was a talent as well, but I'd like to make it very clear that I actually came to the Netherlands as a spouse. In my previous former life, I was also a spouse of an international talent himself. Things changed and I became a professional myself, but this was actually the origin story of how and why I came to the Netherlands. I currently work as an HR business partner, and that's correct that I have a background in recruitment. I have a background in especially positions when I had to recruit quite a lot of technical people, and most of them happen to be for internationals. They asked me, the team of Expat Spouses Initiative asked me about what my core qualities, and the first thing that came to my mind was about resilience. As a person who came to another country to build a new life and to stay with the intention of staying there for longer periods of time, resilience is something that I'm very, very comfortable with, and this is something that I define myself with, and that's why. That's why I choose it as a core quality. And in terms of hobbies, I write here very, very cool. I love observing power, how it's executed, and what it does to people. What does this mean is that having a background in political science, I'm very much interested in decision-making process, what people do, how people do, what people do when they have the power, what do they do when they are losing the power, observing those dynamics, understanding the conflicts, understanding the actors. These are the things that gives me a lot of joy and a lot of fulfillment, actually. So I do it in different ways, not only professionally, but also on a hobby level, looking at daily conflicts to politics to even celebrity news. So I really enjoy that part. Okay, so can we go to the next slide? One thing that I would like to make it very clear about my presentation is that I am the views and everything that I'm expressed in this presentation are actually my own personal views. And they do not necessarily reflect the official recruitment policies or practices and all around HR practices of not my current employer or any of my previous employers. The things that I like to talk about are my general observations throughout my experience, but also from other companies that I did not work for, but I had connections with. So I would like to make it once more very clear that when I'm giving examples and when I'm talking about certain events, they are not necessarily referring to my current or my previous employers. All right, so after this very serious disclaimer, I think we can get to the point, right? So next slide, please. So by now I'm talking like a couple of minutes, and you're probably thinking that, okay, is she ever going to tell something quite interesting by now? So I'd like to tell you about why and how I'm interested in diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, and it's basically because of the specific time that I started working, basically. So I'm an old millennial, and yes, that's a real term. So people around my age group are called old millennials. And people around my age group, they had to go through a very interesting period of time in their employment history, and they have seen a lot of changes from starting their career until now, basically. And when I started, for example, working, the policies around inclusion and policies around diversity were very different than what we have right now, and the things that we're talking right now. First of all, I mean, diversity, when I started working and when it was, when we are talking about somewhere middle of 2000s here, diversity was very much in the agenda, and it was very much an issue of let's try to hire as much females as possible, and let's try to address to this glass ceiling that we're talking about, and yeah, let's try to do things like that. Inclusion was not at all. It was some sort of like a forgotten step sister of the entire context, basically. And back then, I remember very clearly, like, people prided themselves being colorblind, and people prided themselves with not even acknowledging that they have an unconscious bias, let alone talking about it. And this can be quite interesting when you are in a position of selection, and especially recruitment. And these are very important things, of course. Issues that came with, for example, that came with discrimination, that came with serious issues, that came with diversity of lack of it, were always handled in a way that it's like or it's a boring chapter in your employee handbook, or it's a presentation that you have to endure in your first couple of days in the company. But they were more in the context of, we need to police this situation, we need to control this situation, and by the way, there is no situation, kind of thing. Thankfully, we came a little bit, we are doing much better right now. So we are doing, for example, things like, I don't know if you're able to move the slide a little bit better, but back then, when you have the, Otka, can we just click a little bit on this? Yeah, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. Basically, these were your usual sites which you see on an employee guidebook or in the company visuals or things. So all colors of the rainbow, as much as people together, people holding hands, and women in positions of power. And if you're a little bit lucky, then maybe there is also a rainbow flag somewhere. But that was more or less what we were doing back then. And it was also okay. I mean, there was nothing wrong with it. It was a good start, but it was basically not addressing many of the issues that we were having at all. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what happened is, of course, the world started to change in a quite rapid phase, and probably you heard it already with the previous sessions, and you will be hearing it throughout today for another 3,000 times. But it is now a very valuable business case that being diverse in a company pays off. It is a good, valid business case. It's a good idea. It increases people's productivity. It increases results. It gives you better. It makes you a better team, basically, to be diverse. So what happens is, when this is an acknowledged business case, recruiters and HR professionals were kindly tasked to tackle the situation, basically do something, dear HR person, and solve this. So most HR professionals and recruiters were spearheaded to the effort of diversity, so to speak. And yeah, it was exactly like what I told you. If we hire enough, wide enough, if we hire in terms of international, if in terms of different backgrounds, if we hire wide enough, the company will eventually there will be eventually a critical mass which we can work with, and everything is going to be okay. Productivity will go up. People will be working happily after together. It will be just great. Well, it did not happen like that all that much. So some companies tried this. Some companies with varying successes. It worked with some companies. It did not work with some other companies. And the thing that I would like to tell is that I would like to go through why it worked and why it did not work in some companies. If you can go to the next slide. So my theory is that basically when you park the entire diversity and inclusion discussion on the back of the recruiters and to the new hires being a part of the company, it creates its own blind spots basically. Because building international teams are a little bit complexer than just hiring a bunch of people and waiting that it will just solve itself. Many companies with this route have struggled with divisions based on regions, divisions based on business units, or generational divisions as well. And the entire point of bringing different worldviews and bringing different ways of looking and getting creative solutions with the synergy that the international team created were a little bit lost actually. And that some companies, somehow they did better. The ones who took diversity and inclusion as a holistic issue and the ones that are able to wave it to their entire organization and to give it really a place which everybody has some buy-in, those companies tend to do it better. Those companies have had good success in terms of hiring and retaining the internationals and retaining the diverse workforce that they had. I really like the entire metaphor of weaving here because it's basically what you're doing when you're creating an international team. Like you're taking two threads, you cross them, you stitch them. One of them is vertical, the other one is horizontal. You create some patterns, and then you also create at the end of the day, if it works well, if you have it tied together and if it comes together, you also create some sort of little piece of very functional art or very functional craft, basically. And it's not like patching a piece of fabric, which you also see it very clearly that it's a patch and it just doesn't work all that well as weaving something, basically. So the companies who managed to get this idea of, okay, this is an integral part of our company DNA, they did significantly better in absorbing and attracting new talent. And they also made significant success in making those people stay and be happy in their workplace. And when people are happy in their workplace, they tend to attract other happy people. So it was a good idea to bring it to all levels of organization and not leaving it on the back of recruitment or HR only. Can we go to the next slide? So, of course, I mean, in this creating this new international teams and creating this international working environment, it comes with everybody who's involved in this party has their own agendas, have their own concerns, have their own question marks. And what really helped is to listen to people as much as possible and take time, not to rush things, not to put a huge deadline on by 2027 we will have this, we will have that. To also take time to understand that these cultural changes do need some time to be absorbed in an organization, be understood by an organization, and to create a platform for all parties involved. So it's not only an effort of new hires, but it's also something that needs to be sitting well with the employees. It needs to have a significant agenda. It needs to have a place on the management or the leadership level as well. So all the companies who were into it all together, it works quite better. And it was also, so it requires some sort of investment. Basically, it requires some sort of understanding that it is an open platform. It requires an understanding of it will take time, and it will not be something that you can always measure with on a very binary way. So the companies who are able to approach this to a cultural issue instead of KPI, so to speak, which will need to be growing and growing per year, they are able to have much more comfortable results, basically. So my next slide, if I can go to my next slide. So my dear HR colleague, if you also are sort of tasked with this interesting task of solving the diversity and inclusion issue within your company for once and all, I wish you, first of all, the best of luck, because you are going to be probably doing something very interesting, very, very fulfilling, and quite difficult. But I have some suggestions, because before you put some deposit on a business club of pride, or before you make a hiring plan with taking the atlas in the hand and try to screen the entire countries in the world, before you try to think in terms of a Benetton ad, probably there might be some good soul searching and good understanding of your current team. That can be very useful, basically, if you would like to do that. The most important thing that to understand, in my opinion, is to not to underestimate the entire commitment of the leadership, basically, because if the leadership level is not fully committed to the goals and understandings of diversity and inclusion, well, it will not sit well with the rest of the organization, and it will not also be it will not create the impact that you would like to create. Because inclusivity only works if it's been accepted by the entire organization. And if your boardroom does not look diverse enough, if your leadership level does not look diverse enough, then it's a very difficult message to sell. It's a very difficult message to get across. So it really needs some serious buy-in, actually. And also another very important aspect of it is that something which doesn't sound very cheerful, and it's like everybody dreads on this kind of things, but unless you have the right kind of governance practices as an organization, it's also very difficult to create the environment which diversity and inclusion can flourish. So the things that I would like to talk about is, for example, some sort of good systems which you have can ensure that accountability is in place, which you can ensure that there are basically checks and balances, and the leadership is willing to also have support these all different checks and balances and governance practices. And of course, the most important thing is that you also have to understand your current audience, and to create a plan which will not which will also sit well with them. Diversity and inclusion has many faces. It's not only hiring the only international talent, but it's also you can also make different ways of it. There's the entire aspect of basically ageism, or being diverse in terms of age in an organization where not many people are talking about, but it's also a very serious aspect of making sure that we are diverse. There is also a very big aspect about being also physically inclusive in an organization. It can be taken from a point of where you are basically making sure that it's that your organization is entirely accessible for everybody in there. So make sure that what works for you is there. Understand that not all picture definitions or book definitions of diversity may not work for your organization for that period of time, but it's a route that you can take step by step. So make sure that the efforts that you make do not also shock the core of your organization, so you can create some buy-in. So I was also being asked a question about what will happen now, then what will happen when it comes to when you're thinking diversity, inclusion and recruitment after the pandemic. And well, every time I hear that question, I kind of want to run away from it, because I personally like to think that, yeah, everything that we have done so far is not very much it's not possible to follow the same routes as we have done previously. But at the end of the day, the entire pandemic also gave us a huge chance to rethink about how we are looking at geography, how we're looking about defined ways of working, and it gave us a huge chance to create much more diverse teams than it was ever possible. And this can also work very much with you. This can be a great advantage for the ones who are now making those kind of efforts, taking those efforts to rethink about what the possibilities the current situation give. I'm hearing that, for example, pandemic hits the woman most, so it can be a very nice way of approaching diversity if you would like to do something like that. And which you can basically, it gives you some sort of free card to create your new strategy to within the possibilities of this current with this current situation, where we are not bounded by geography anymore, where we're not bounded by working from an office anymore, and yeah, there is more talent available as a result of unemployment. So think about that, I would say.
That's great, Deniz. Thank you so much. Sorry for disrupting you. I'm just looking at the time, and we have now 10 minutes to answer the questions. And
okay.
I received a couple of questions, and I think you just answered the last part. The first question was, now working from home becomes a standard way of working. How will affect this diversity and inclusion policies? But you have just mentioned in the pandemic time how it should be applied or how it works for the organizations. If you have something to add, you can add, but otherwise I can go to the next question.
We can go to the next question. Yes. If anybody wants to hear some more stuff, they could reach out to me.
Sure, exactly. So if you have any more questions after this session, you can connect with Deniz on Swapcard and you can ask the questions. And second question is, you know that small and medium companies actually contribute 70% of the jobs in the labor market. And it's very important for internationals to connect with SMEs. But what are some challenges in making this really happen? Because most of the small and medium companies are not ready to hire internationals. And also most of the internationals don't necessarily apply for the SMEs. So maybe if you have any idea how this
Oh, that's a great question. I'm really happy with this question, as indeed this is one of the biggest bottlenecks of hiring international. Also, if you happen to work in recruitment positions in a smaller organizations. If the organization setup is very much geared in a very local way, and if the systems and the communication is based on, for example, the local language, and if you miss the language skills, then it's a very difficult hire. And it's also not a strategic hire, as it is, they can come and do the job, but the connections and the entire team building aspect may just be a little bit less. Mm-hmm. In those kind of companies, the buy-in of leadership, the strategy of the future strategy of hiring strategy of the leadership is most important. In those kind of companies, it has to come to the agenda in a way that, okay, we are going to create and we are ready to change our systems in such a way that we can also attract this international talent.
Yes. There is another question. What's one important thing for a new international employer who is trying to hire internationals, as a first step? What should they do to make it happen, in your opinion?
Okay, again, we're talking about more or less the same thing. I would really go back and take a deep look into the actors and the systems that you currently have in your company. how inclusive is it? Is it going to work, basically? Are your ways of working very much to be, are they very local, or is it something that you can do? Is it something that could be scaled up to the international talent? And if the question is more in the sense of how are we going to do because we don't know how to deal with it, issues like relocation, immigration, or hiring the right kind of talent. Well, especially in Eindhoven region, there are lots of experts on that. I would definitely use the expert help, especially in the first couple of times. Please invest on the legal and HR support that you're supposed to be getting, because in the long term, it can cause you much more issues. Basically, don't skimp on that kind of aspect, that kind of cost, basically. But that's a strategic decision. If you say that, okay, I'm going to have my hiring strategy is all focused on international hire, your company should have the systems and the right kind of culture that would work with this kind of hires.
Yes, perfect. And I have another question. It says, how does it look like actually a culture where diversity and inclusion is part of it? I agree that it's more than a window shopping.
How does it look like? In my personal opinion, it looks like from entering to the door of the company, that you know that, I mean, if I am also less able and less mobile, that it's possible to get into the company, to the entire communications. How do they, in which language are they, to how are they written? Are they referring, are they inclusive for the entire audience? To ways of addressing, ways of looking at issues, from communication to benefits that are being offered, to ways of working, if it's supporting different ways of personal life. All these things all these things give me some sense of understanding about how ready or how diverse this company is.
Exactly. And it's not only just about hiring someone, it's really what they do after that, right? It's really a lot to do with, yeah. I mean, thinking about receiving an email again and again with the title of dear sirs, and if you happen to be a woman in that company, how does it feel, really? I can understand that these are very accepted communication ways, but we really have to take a very good look and think back about how we talk and how we communicate and what kind of impression we give when we are addressing a larger group. Yes. Deniz, I have the last question and we will wrap it up. I think we have 2 minutes. To internationals who start working at small or big companies, which are not yet internationalized, such as big corporates like, I don't know, it comes to mind Jumbo, but I don't know, there are other companies also, where the majority of employees are Dutch and internationals know that it's not very international environment to go in. So what can they do to be seen and heard to attract these internationals? What do you think?
I'm not understanding. Is this question coming from a company who has actually currently a very local base and would like to internationalize in the coming period of time? Is this where this question is coming from, or is this an employee who's asking?
Yeah, it's from
internationals
who are looking for a job and they want to start working as at any small or big companies, but which are not yet internationalized. For example, there are some Dutch companies.
This person has concerns about being the pioneer.
Yeah, or because, for example, some companies have really Dutch culture or Dutch employees, and it's difficult to go in. So what should the company should do to attract these internationals in that case?
Well, if it's the company's goal to attract these internationals, maybe they should really take look at their way of working and see if there's anything to improve. Because, I mean, if this is an idea, or the other idea would be, we are attracting you, but we are also expecting you to adjust to our ways of working. And by providing those people extra guidance, coaching, language lessons, and making sure that the company and the company culture is understood better from the international perspective, you can also take those kind of efforts. You can also make those kind of efforts as well.
Yes. Perfect. I think
so. It's two ways of looking at it. I mean, it's depending on your end goal.
Yes, and I think I would like to thank you, Deniz, for your time and for this interesting talk. And time is up, so we have really
Okay.
automated system. So thanks so much. If you want to connect with Deniz, you can actually make a meeting request on Swapcard, go to her profile, and you can have a chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
I will now stop sharing.
Okay.
I need to stop the recording, stop the live stream.